Was it right for Speaker Pelosi to visit Taiwan this week?
On balance, no. And the reason I say that is because my benchmark for success or failure or usefulness or non-usefulness is whether it enhances the underlying security of the people in the island of Taiwan. And I don't believe it meets those criteria. I understand the political motivations, but on a cold, hard national security question, which is Taiwan more or less secure as a result of this visit? Or are US-China relations more stable as a result of this visit? The answer in both cases would have to be no.
So what was meaningfully achieved then?
And Speaker Pelosi has had a long-standing view on human rights, which I entirely respect and by and large support as far as China is concerned. She's been outspoken on Tiananmen in '89, on Tibet, on Xinjiang, and of the rights of the Taiwanese people and the rights of the people in the Chinese mainland to be able to express their own views freely. That's why the Chinese have reacted in the way in which they have done. It's entirely predictable how they've reacted. And I just think whereas Speaker Pelosi has the right to visit Taiwan whenever she chooses, the question I always ask is it wise to visit given all these other material factors?
Expand on your characterization of the reaction that we've seen from China, because as we speak, we are seeing an intensification of military and economic retaliation from China. Beijing has recalled the US ambassador. We've seen trade being suspended with Taiwan, for example, and now even playing war games, conducting live fire military exercises in the last 24 hours. How concerning is President Xi's reaction in your view?
I do not believe that the Chinese reaction to what's unfolded with the Pelosi visit is on a pathway to crisis, escalation, conflict, or war with the United States. Xi Jinping doesn't want that, and the Americans don't want that, because neither side is actually ready to fight out a war over Taiwan. The more concerning element for me, however, when I analyze this in the cold light of day, is underneath it all, what we are beginning to see is a Chinese strategic conclusion that the United States is beginning to operationally change its one China policy. And that is a policy which was anchored in the so-called third of three joint communiques between China and the US back in 1982. And it is a communique which says there is only one China and there are no two Chinas and there is no one China or one Taiwan. And that's kind of been the strategic ballast underpinning the relationship for the last 40 years. What I'm concerned about is the Chinese putting various things together, 2 and 2 and reaching 5, is a conclusion which is itself disturbing. If they actually conclude that the United States is walking away from the one China policy, then I think we're in a whole new world of pain. That's what concerns me most about the Pelosi visit.
So expand on that for me. How do you see the future relationship between the US and China if Speaker Pelosi's lone wolf move has, as you say, undermined the US posture of strategic ambiguity and that one China policy?
Well, I think it's important we do understand the Pelosi visit, as you just asked, within its wider strategic context. If we stand back for a moment, what's happening here? The US-China relationship is fundamentally governed by a balance of power. And that balance of power in East Asia and the West Pacific over the last decade or so has been steadily shifting in China's direction. It's not complete yet. There's a long way to go, certainly militarily, and certainly economically, and certainly technologically. But that underpinning strategic ballast in the relationship provided by that balance of power is itself in flux. And China is therefore feeling more confident because it is more powerful. The second element in the equation is Xi Jinping's leadership style. So what concerns me is, given underneath it all, you have an increasingly febrile, fractious relationship between the two countries. It simply takes often a match to light a flame, which then catches fire more broadly. That is what I'm concerned about. Not tomorrow, not next month, but certainly in the years ahead, particularly as Xi Jinping is likely to be re-elected or reappointed as General Secretary of the Communist Party at the 20th Congress in October, November.
And Prime Minister, a lot of our viewers are following the money. They want more context. They want to understand how this is going to shift the sands economically and politically. I've spoken to experts this week. They say we can probably price out any kind of Trump-era tariff reduction for now. Would you agree?
Markets, in my observation, have been able to price in, shall we say, political judgments and misjudgments within a band of possibilities. When you start to go beyond that band into fundamental geopolitical destabilization and risk, then markets then will respond accordingly, and they will seek to put their capital elsewhere into more secure holdings and often more liquid holdings. So looking at this as it's unfolding, I am concerned about the structure of US-China relations for the rest of this decade. I am on balance not persuaded that we are likely to see any intentional war between the two sides this decade. I think Xi Jinping's timetable for that is more likely to be late 20s, early 30s. But in the meantime, and this is the imponderable, given the absence of strategic guardrails or rules of the road for the relationship between China and the United States, in the meantime, there continues to be this risk of conflict by accident and miscalculation.
The Chinese leadership watching very closely the outcomes of the US midterms. President Biden, of course, facing significant pressure on his leadership now. How do you think that is going to play, and this situation is going to play on both sides of the aisle at home for him? And could you call this a win for the Democrats in any way?
I wouldn't describe it as a win for the Democrats. A friend of mine who's a Democratic pollster here in the United States indicated that in the top set of 8 issues on the voters' minds, the foreign policy questions of either Russia, Ukraine, and of China, Taiwan don't really figure. It starts with the price of gas, and it moves through cost of living pressures as well as what's happening, what else is happening within healthcare. I think therefore, the political equation in the United States is very difficult to predict. The Chinese deep view is American politics is domestically politically unraveling. Of course, it's up to the good people of the United States and its political leadership to prove them wrong.